But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. And as I've mentioned earlier, this is a topic that a lot of people don't talk about. What is very common is he's cheated or she's cheated and we've separated and that's it. There is no consideration about whether or not can we work this out. And I'm not saying all cases, is salvageable, all right? Because there is, to me, it is so important. The message we are teaching our children in circumstances like that is so important. Working it out, it is a show of forgiveness and strength. Walking away when it doesn't work, too, it is a show of strength that you can you can choose yourself and do what's right by you. So Ronelle, would you start by sharing with us what happened?
So the affair is actually quite some time ago now, because we actually did attempt reconciliation and stayed together for a further 7 years after he sat me down and told me what had happened. So we met. I was 11, he was 13. We've been best friends since then. Engaged at 16, married at 18, 4 kids by the time I was 28. And in the midst of that, there was a diagnosis as well on my husband's part of an autoimmune disease. Yeah. And that changed our world. That was early on. That was in 2006 when I was pregnant with our third. So I was very much stay-home mum, with a husband who very career-orientated and very focused on providing for the family. And I think we both are in agreement that we should have got counselling then, because such news like that really did rock both our worlds. And that was probably a key point of disengagement in our marriage and in our relationship. Yep. It was very personal for him. It was very, and so how he interpreted it was all about him and what he was going through, and what I was doing to try and support and care for him in that situation wasn't what he needed, and there was just no communication. So we really kind of started, that's where we started to separate. Yeah. The affair came a few years after that, and I saw it coming. He was suffering a lot with, in himself, and I knew he wasn't happy. But we weren't great at communicating, and what communication we did have was just not landing where it needed to. Yeah. And it was just causing further tensions. Yeah. So I went from being a very strong, opinionated woman, which I had been all my whole life, to becoming a peacekeeper, and which is not my natural state, but that's who I've been for the last 10 years. So fast forward 2 years, and look, we received a lot of advice when the affair became evident, and he chose to end it and asked to repair our marriage and repair our relationship. And the truth is, for me, I chose to stay in the marriage then because I did love him. I mean, I've known him since I was 11. We've been best friends, and there was never any doubt that I loved him. And certainly, what he had become through that whole process, from the diagnosis through to the end of the affair, didn't align with his goals and his visions and his desires and who he wanted to be as a man. And I could very see it as broken as I was devastated, don't get me wrong. I think I was physically sick for weeks afterwards, couldn't eat, playing every scenario through your head, and everything that you've been told for the last 2 years, what's real? All these precious moments that you've had over those years, were they real or were they staged? Was that him feeling guilty? Was that, what's real? You don't know. And so I'm not justifying he made his choices, and they were bad choices, but we were both broken. There is no question in my mind. When I looked at him and I looked at myself, we were both suffering, we were both in pain. And my goal at the time, and the reason I chose to stay, was I thought, well, why should we separate, heal, and then give the benefit of our healing to other people? Like, why can't we do this together and be able to repair, restore, and be able to give each other what each other needs with a whole new understanding and a whole new, place of experience.
Yeah.
So that was my motivation, but that's not really what happened. The next 7 years, we tried, but we certainly didn't have the emotional intelligence that we have right now. And we failed miserably, to the point where our relationship was so toxic at the end of last year that I made the decision to leave, and have spent the last 9 months going through what's been the darkest time in my life. I've lost my mum to cancer. I left the marriage with no money, no nothing, and had to find a place to live, had to find a job, had to restart my career after, closing down a business and having to lay off 20 staff who I loved dearly. So a lot of loss in the last 12 in that 12 months.
Yeah.
But in it, I chose to heal. I chose to lean into the pain. I chose to lean into every uncomfortable area of my life. Anything that came up that triggered me, I leant into it as hard as I could to figure it out and to figure out what was going on, who I was, what did I need to fix, what did I need to change. And the amazing thing for me was that I didn't think he could change. I didn't think he was capable of change. And after leaving, for him, it was the same thing. Like, it was like this massive pressure release for him as well. And where we'd both been in such a strong cycle of toxicity where we were feeding off each other's, pain, that me totally leaving the situation, me totally breaking the cycle, was just this huge pressure release for both of us.
Yep.
And so I saw an instant change in him within 2 weeks. And to be honest, I kept looking, waiting for him to explode, thinking it wasn't sustainable. He couldn't change that quickly, waiting for there to be another trigger and for him to, to prove me right, prove me right that he couldn't change. And he never did. And actually, while I went off into my dark space and basically hit rock bottom and stayed there for as long as I needed to figure things out, he really stepped up and became an amazing father. He really stepped in to be the support that our 4 kids needed during that time. And I guess a challenge, we had a family event fairly recently, and he approached me and said, look, we've both been through a huge year. Can we at least commit to catch up without the kids, just catch up and have the hard conversations and he goes, I just want some understanding on some things. And I went away from that, I guess, scared, because I had so convinced myself that reconciliation we were done. We tried that and failed, so it wasn't going to happen.
Wow.
But I went away and I thought about it, and I realized I can't be a coach. I can't promote change. I can't celebrate my own change and decide that someone can't. That's not who I am. That's not what I'm about. And
that's
so
right.
Wow. I can't. So it was that realization for me, was that, okay, I'm willing to have the conversations. That's as far as it will go. We're just going to have the conversation. And yeah, over probably, a month, 6 weeks of having really deep, hard conversations, we probably sat and we heard each other for the first time and listened to each other, and were willing to, rather than blame, rather than to point the finger, rather than to attack, just genuinely listen to each other's point of view, each other's like what we went through with key moments in our lives. Like, we've been through some pretty big stuff. We've been through autoimmune diseases. We've been through affairs. We've had 3 businesses and we've moved 22 times in our 23 years of marriage.
Wow, that is crazy.
We've had 4 interstate moves in there.
How do you even do that? That is just madness.
we had a business in Queensland and lived in Victoria, a hospitality business that was running 7 days a week and, you know, running between 2 states, you know. So we've done some pretty silly, crazy things. And, you know, to be able to sit through and kind of go, so yes, we agreed this was the event, but listen to how each of us came away from that event and what we took from that event. Mm-hmm. And actually, rather than go, well, you're wrong and I'm right, kind of go, no, actually, we're both right, because that's where we each come from. We all come from different things. And to kind of, instead of going, well, that's wrong, kind of go, oh, I understand. Okay, so how could I have supported, how could we have done that different? Like what could have we done at that time that would have changed the result? And that's pretty much, we got to the point where there was just no more of those conversations to be had. We'd done it all. We talked about every possible nook and cranny, every little dark corner. Amazing. And when we finally got to that point, it was like, well, next time we meet, what are we going to do? You know, like we can't keep rehashing the past, and you can't.
That's right.
You know, you've got to get to a point where you've had the conversation and you leave the conversation.
That's like, right.
You know,
it's finished.
It's done.
Yeah,
it's done. You might still you might still get triggered by something, but
Absolutely.
that trigger is usually a reflection of yourself, not the reflection of someone else.
That's
and
right.
You know, the question you got to ask in those moments is, what is it in me that I need to address? Like, what is it that's going on in my space, in my world, that's causing me to feel this way? And I think the biggest thing for me in our situation and the religious circles that we've grown up in and the community that we've surrounded ourselves with over our whole lives is the misconception that forgiveness is a feeling. Forgiveness is a choice. And I think for us, the biggest hurdle was that once it all came out and I chose to forgive, that I wasn't then allowed to feel anymore because I'd forgiven him.
Yep.
And so anytime I got triggered or anytime something came up that was a feeling that made me, you know, be upset, whatever, but I wasn't allowed to talk it through because that was mistaken as unforgiveness, and I said I forgave.
That's right.
And so for me, it became this thing where every time I had a feeling or every time something came up, I felt like I had to shut it down, because if I let it come out, that meant that I hadn't actually forgiven him, and that's not the truth. The truth is forgiveness is a choice. You've got to still lean into the feelings. You still got to. You can't heal without leaning into those feelings. And so the fact that I didn't allow myself to do that, and just meant that it never healed. It just sat under the surface. Yeah. And I can honestly say, just creating 7 years of being busy, going into business straight after was the silliest thing we could have done. We didn't feel like we had an option at the time. We felt like it was an opportunity that presented itself, and, you know, therefore we should have jumped at it.
Yeah.
But it just meant that we both created such busy lives that instead of
addressing it,
instead of throwing ourselves into finding a new identity, because it's certainly a betrayal like that, you lose your identity. You know, it never crossed my mind that he was capable of making that decision. Yeah. And that's what threw me more than anything. It was like, that's just not his character. That's not who he is. I just never crossed my mind that he could be in such a dark place that he would make a decision like that would impact us in such a way.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it happens. It wasn't did he plan on getting himself into that situation? Absolutely not. But the truth is we lost our identity, and we should have put more work into those early years into rediscovering what that identity was. What did our relationship look like? Who did we look like as individuals? And we didn't. We just filled it with being busy.
Yeah.
And it was not until we stopped being busy, I stopped being busy, that I couldn't hide it anymore. It all had to come spilling to the surface. And that's pretty much what it did. It did in a spectacular form, I can tell you.
I can truly appreciate that. So so every time I have a conversation like that, I usually end it with what are the things that people should look out for. But before I go there, I want you to share the change that has now taken effect and how the relationship is right now.
It's the relationship is, it's almost weird because there's something so familiar and so comfortable about our history and about who we are, but yet so much has changed too. So I found in the first few weeks of getting back together, I did sort of catch myself a few times falling into old habits and, thinking certain things and that I would have thought, rewind a couple of years ago. And that kind of really took me by surprise because I was kind of like, oh, there's some triggers there. Like that's not a habit that I want to form, and that's something that we said we wouldn't ever do again. And so you do have to put in a little bit of extra effort. It's a little bit more emotional energy and into stopping yourself, because you do it automatically and it's not often even impressed upon by the other partner, by your partner. Like my husband certainly we haven't come back and he's like, well, I expect you to do this or I expect you to do that. That's all gone.
Yeah.
But we put those expectations on ourselves sometimes, and we can do it without even being conscious about it. Yeah. So it's really important to make the time to sit and talk, to sit and evaluate. We hold each other accountable, but anytime we've gotten to this, we've had to get to the point where anytime something feels off or anytime you feel, to speak it out.
Yeah.
Because unless you speak it out, you don't get the clarity back, That's right. So there's been a few times where, something will happen and I'll go, no, hang on a sec, I interpret it this way. And he was like, well, that's not what I said.
Yeah.
And actually, I think a great thing I've learned recently is that I'm a very literal speaker, but I'm an inferential listener. Whereas he is just literal. I like that. Yeah. Whereas he is a literal speaker and a literal thinker. And so we've found a few times where he says I'm thirsty, and I interpret that you want me to get you a drink, and it's not the case. Yeah. But it's a perfect example where you've got to be really careful that you're not just falling back into old habits and assuming. You can't assume. You have to question, and you have to kind of go, is this what we both want? Is this right? I'm thinking this, but is that what you mean? Yeah. You've got to be willing to really challenge each other on those things. And it's uncomfortable because it's not a normal conversation. It's not, it's not, but you don't want to be the old normal. That's right. You've got to have clarity of who you are as an individual. You've got to have clarity of your vision. I love the saying that the weight of your future has to be greater than the weight of your past. And the thing is, it's one thing to have, you've got to have a direction together, but you've also got to know where you're going personally, right. and aligning that with each other. And so they're awkward conversations, but they're absolutely necessary if you're going to create a new normal.
I like it. I like it a lot. And so before we end, there's just 3 things though that I've picked up from this conversation. I was busy scribbling notes, if you notice. So one of the 3 things you said was that we're still allowed to feel after forgiveness. Absolutely. Yep. Because it is true though, the minute you feel the trigger, you think, oh my God, it's I can't feel this way, because you are entitled to still feel. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you've chosen to reconcile doesn't mean there isn't work still to do.
That's
you're
right.
Still going to have feelings. You're still going to be upset. You're still going to have to go through the pain.
That's right.
They're separate things.
That's right.
It's a choice
Absolutely.
Versus a process.
Correct. The other thing was the trigger. When we get triggered, the reflection is on us, which is true, because the trigger is the story we tell ourselves in our head. It may not be a fact. It is just something that has triggered an emotion in us. And a lot of times the miscommunication happens because we, like you say, we don't go and clarify it. We allow the trigger to take us into this storyland that we make up. And again, that jeopardizes the success of the reconciliation.
Mhm.
The last thing was rediscovering who we are as a person and the new partnership. So those are such important and valuable advice that I wish more people would know, and that it is possible. And I hope that when you watch this
It is.
video, you realize that, look at Ronelle. It's not easy. It took her that long to be able to talk about it because the process is hard. But is it worth it? Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, you fell in love in the first place for a reason. So maybe go back and find that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you would like to share before we go?
Yeah, don't give up. Don't give up so easy. I think one of the things I have been shocked about is that this particular situation is a lot more popular than we like to admit because we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
But the amount of marriages that have gone through that and have stayed together is actually quite high, but people don't like to talk about it because you don't want to shame your partner. You don't want to draw negative attention to your relationship. And that I completely understand. I've been in that situation myself, but it is important to talk about it because it doesn't matter whether it's an affair or whether it's something else. Marriage is not perfect. Humans are not perfect. Relationships are not perfect. And unless we're willing to have hard conversations, we think we isolate ourselves. We think we're alone. And so what I want to say is you are not alone. And speak up because you'd be really surprised who walks into your life who can empathize and can help and can support you through whatever it is you need to do and whatever change you're going through.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. And Ronelle's so right. It happens more often than you know, and it is the shame that keeps us from discussing it. And everybody if we all just cower in shame, nothing gets accomplished. And you've come out of it, and like I said, like we all know we're not perfect. So we admit we're not. People make mistakes, we get over it, and life goes on. And life should get on even better. So with that, I'm just going to end this interview. Thank you so much for sharing with us, because I know this is hard. This is very polarizing. No, don't stay, don't stay. It's like end of the day, it's our decision and it's our lives. So thank you again.
Absolutely.
And have a great day ahead. Bye.
Wow.